Hey everyone, welcome back to True Crime IRL. I'm your host, Kelly Barons Brink. So last week I told you about Ireland's Catholic-run mother and baby homes that were open in the mid 20th century. They ruined a lot of lives. So today I have a very special guest. She's a woman who was born into one of these homes. She was one of the lucky ones. She survived. And now she's a huge part of the coalition of mother and baby home survivors. She's a survivor. Welcome to the show, Clodagh Malone.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you for agreeing to be on the show. I'm so excited to talk to you. So, I have so many questions for you. I'm sure you've been asked a lot of these questions before, but I'm excited to hear your story. So, just a little background on what I'm doing right now. I'm talking about some of the crimes and conspiracies and cover-ups and things like that of specifically the Catholic Church right now. So last week's episode was about the mother and baby homes in Tuam. So I know there were a lot more homes than just that one. There were like 18, something like that. Is that right?
Well, there were hundreds of these homes speckled all over Ireland, but officially for the Commission of Inquiry, which was started in 2014, that was the government coming together with survivors. And they only listed that amount of homes, but there were hundreds. Okay. You've got to remember, like, babies were currency.
Oh, yes.
Yes, huge currency. It was worth a lot of money.
Oh, yeah. I talked a lot about that. It was one of the biggest commodities of Ireland at the time and one of the largest child trafficking organizations of all time in the world, really. So take me back. So 1970s, when you were born, right? I don't want to out your age or anything like that. So sorry, but take me back to 1970 when your mother, your birth mother, was pregnant. What information do you have about that time? Do you know a lot about what was going on then?
Oh, I do. Absolutely. I suppose what happened, really how I've reached where I am now is I am marinated in, the history of the mother and baby homes. So in 1970, my birth mother was in a relationship for 2.5 years. She fell pregnant, never told my father, and she fled to England, as a lot of women did, thinking that possibly they could have maybe a termination or give their child up for adoption in Ireland to get away from the shame. So right. She presented herself 4 days before my birth. I would imagine she was only 23, which was old for mother and baby homes.
Yeah.
And she was escorted by, I don't know whether social workers or policemen or whatever. And she was put on a boat with another Irish girl who was pregnant by a parish priest.
Oh, so what? Then, wait, back up.
Yeah.
She was pregnant by a parish priest.
Yeah, this happened an awful lot.
This did.
Oh,
wow.
Yes, and a lot of nuns got pregnant by parish priests and their children were given up. Oh, like everybody was at it in Ireland. And remember, we had no contraception.
Right.
And sex outside of marriage. And if you got pregnant,
big no-no.
You were better off being a murderer.
That's exactly what I said in last week's episode. I said women who fell pregnant outside of marriage were on the same level as murderers and rapists and
murderers
killers.
And better.
Yes. Yep. Just a terrible things that happened in the mid 20th century in Ireland at the hands of the Catholic Church for the most part. So, which home were you born into? Do you know the name of that place or?
Yes, so I was born when my mother was scrubbing a granite step. Her labours broke, and I was born there, and a very horrific delivery, because in the homes our mothers weren't given any pain relief.
No.
They roared into their faces. There were no doctors present, for stitching or anything like that. It was absolutely brutal. I was with my mother for 10 weeks, and I was named Aileen McCabe. Okay. And I was baptized within 24 hours. That's what they did, because they wanted to try and we were baptized very quickly.
I was going to ask, is that because so many babies died, they wanted to get them baptized before that might happen? Maybe? Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They got them baptized, but it also was to take the stain of sin from the baby.
Okay.
So literally, our mothers weren't present. Well, you see, I was born in St. Patrick's in Dublin, which is the largest mother and baby home in Ireland.
Okay.
And it was one of the roughest mother and baby homes because it was generally with the other mother and baby homes, Tuam, Besborough, Sean Ross Abbey, the buildings were owned by the nuns. Where we were, it was owned by the council.
Oh,
So
okay.
it was a workhouse before, very rough.
Mm-hmm.
So the nuns rented it off the council, and the council paid, I don't know what you call it in America, for our stay.
Okay. Okay.
So generally I should have gone out at about 6 weeks. And in 1970s, they were kind of turning them out at 6 weeks because they realized then we were currency and they didn't want bonding. But I was 10 weeks with my mother, and my mother then was put on a bus with me, and she had to go into this home, which was in the inner city of Dublin, and it had my respectable married new parents in one room and my birth mother and me in the other room. And I was taken from her and given to parents that weren't my blood. I didn't know them. They were strangers. And she then got on a bus, went back to the home and packed up her belongings and got on the boat and got the hell out of Ireland, as a lot of women did.
Oh, she left Ireland after that.
Yeah,
Okay.
a lot of women that were in the Magdalen laundries and the mother and baby homes, they left Ireland because Ireland had been so cruel to them.
Right.
And
I
also
don't blame them. I didn't know that was an option. I know a lot of the women who were there were, didn't have much money or the means to leave or anything. So she's kind of lucky then that she was able to do that, I think. Yeah.
She was able to go over to family. You see, in the mother and baby homes, again in the 70s, they allowed women to leave after their children were given up.
Okay.
Whereas before, in Philomena's time, the mothers and children were kept for 2.5 years. And that was hard labor and penance. And then the child was taken 2.5 years.
Yeah.
So, which was horrendous.
Oh, terrible. So much bonding would happen. I mean, I remember those years with my kids, and it's some of the sweetest time. And just to have that ripped away is just absolutely heartbreaking. These stories just kill me. So have you ever been back to St. Patrick's to visit or talk to anybody who may have been there at the time or get answers or anything like that?
Yes, we have reunions. Where I was born was demolished because the council owned it, and they've put up new houses. So all the children that perished, 6,000 children died from, say, the mid 1900s up to, say, the 70s. And 3,000 were at the home, 3,500 where I was. The mortality rate at one stage in the homes was up to 82%.
Wow. That is a staggering statistic. It's sickening. And in the 70s, that was a time when there was medicine available. There were things like that could have been done to prevent this.
Well, in the 70s, no, it didn't happen, and the 60s. Now, sadly, and I hope that there aren't little ears listening.
Yeah, no.
Where I was born, we didn't have any, what we say in Ireland, you say Nigerian. We had no foreigners in Ireland, right? Remember, we were very Caucasian Catholic.
Yes.
So a woman happened. The only foreigners that we had, Nigerians coming in, were the ones who were training to be doctors, because we have the most amazing medical school in Dublin.
Oh, nice.
But the Irish women, loved, something different.
Yeah.
So any woman that got pregnant and had what was called a half caste, which we now know is mixed race. Those children never went out for adoption.
Right.
Those children went on to homes. So these were industrial schools, and then they went on to Borstals or Magdalen laundries. Down syndrome or handicapped children they were left to die. And there was a ward where I was, which was called the handicapped ward, which was at the back of the building. And it's terrible to even think that this went on. And they were left to starve.
Wow.
And that is the truth.
Yes, I know.
for Ireland, and I
Mhm.
have only ever come across one Down syndrome child that went to foster care, and unfortunately she died.
Wow.
So the regime where I was, it equipped for up to 500 babies at
Mhm.
any given time. We were safety pinned into our cots for 23 hours and 20 minutes a day.
You were
Our
pinned
mother
in
was
your
only allowed to
cots.
see us in our cots in case we rolled with cot death. I
Yes.
remember there was nobody. They had other mothers minding us. Our own mothers weren't minding us. And
Mhm.
our own mother would see us for 20 minutes in the morning and 20 minutes at night. And that was it.
That is so sad. So sad. I've watched all the documentaries. I've watched everything I could get my hands on, all the news articles I've seen. So the things you are telling me, I know they're a fact. I know that this is true. But for so many people, especially in the United States, I don't think a lot of people know that this actually happened. And it's just so hard to believe that it happened in the 20th century. That's not that long ago. And this was still going on. And so you said the thing about Caucasian babies. Now, especially in the United States, I think there was a high demand during those years for a white baby. They wanted a white baby, and there were not any white babies really to adopt. So they saw this abundance of children who were orphans in Ireland or in these homes, and they kind of it was a perfect match. Really, the American people would get what they wanted, and the Irish, well, the Catholic Church they would profit. So they were really like, they were selling babies, they were getting free slave labor in these homes, they were turning a profit, they were in business basically.
Well, they were hugely in business because our mothers were paying, because our
Mm-hmm.
mothers, whatever they were getting per head from the government, which we call social welfare here,
Yes.
the state was paying, society was paying, and the church was paying. And they were feeding us rotten food
Yeah.
as children.
If you got food, they were starving a lot of people. The reports that I've seen were terrible, just skinny kids, the cries just of hunger echoed through the buildings. It was a hell on earth, it seems like. So what are your thoughts on the Catholic Church? Are you still affiliated with the Catholic Church at all, or what do you think about their role in this? Have they given apologies? Have they done anything to kind of repair the damage that they did?
No, they haven't apologized. I met the Pope. I had a private meeting with the Pope in 2018 when he came
Really?
to Ireland, and there were 8 survivors. Yes, and it was quite incredible if you Google it, because it was a tremendous meeting. I asked him, would he say at his mass that it wasn't a mortal sin for a mother or a child to look for each other, as we were told, by the Catholic Church and by, our families. And he said it. And for me, that just changed everything in Ireland. My searches were up. The searches in the agencies were up by 80%.
Oh my
So these
gosh.
women in their 80s and in their 70s now realized that it wasn't a mortal sin. But am I affiliated to the Catholic Church? Absolutely not. No,
No.
because how could you have, like, my social worker was a priest. They weren't qualified to be social workers. My
No.
family weren't vetted. I'm one of the lucky ones. Um, but children went to diabolical families that would have been better off staying with their birth mothers.
Right.
There was a lot of abuse that went on. And the only thing that the Catholic Church, and the only way to disarm the Catholic Church all over the world, is stop giving them money.
I'm working on that
That's
right
how we
now.
do it. Yes.
I'm
Yeah.
working on that right now. I agree. I feel the same way. The crimes, the atrocities that have been committed at the hands of the priests, the nuns, the pope, the powers that be. It's if any other organization did the things that the Catholic Church has done, they would be done for. They'd be done. They would not be still in business. They wouldn't be around anymore. The Catholic Church just has so much power. It's really bad.
You have no idea. You've no, and I'd say I'm 52. And as a child, my adopted parents separated. It really wasn't great, it just was
Mm-hmm.
messy.
Mm-hmm.
And we used to have priests coming to see us. and the fear, and they would be touching us up as children, sexually touching us up.
Oh.
And I can speak about this now.
Mm-hmm.
But you would actually go into a paralysis when you would see a priest coming into your house. I just, still to this day, I'm getting pins and needles in my legs.
Mm-hmm.
Not going back to that child. Not now, I would tell them F off or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But the Catholic Church are finished in this country. And anybody that says, and I totally, like, my father is 86. I respect, him.
Right. Yes.
But
And
he's
his
not going,
viewpoints, but yeah.
he doesn't go to church anymore. Just when all this atrocity came out.
Yeah.
So no, it's finished here.
Yeah. The Catholic Church basically stepped in for the government back when Ireland got its freedom from the British, right? The Catholic Church played a huge part in governing the country. So it's a very Catholic country, but the grip of the church, you think it is loosening. People are getting wise to what's going on.
Oh, without a shadow of a doubt, because you have people like myself and other advocates who are absolutely fantastic and saying, you know what, look at us. We're not, we don't have horns and a tail. Yes, you called us bastards and we're born out of wedlock. No, we're not. Like, nowhere does it say in the Bible, that about bastards, or that's a man-made religion. And what happened here in Ireland, it was man-made for themselves. And they weren't doing the workings of Christ. And that's very different. And when you look at Catholic Ireland, we only have something like 3% Protestants. So they're Church of England. Now, we do have a lot of Muslims and different, religions coming in.
Right.
But, and like, as I say, Ireland is a very different country compared to it was even 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah.
I can't describe the change.
It's less conservative, more progressive. They're finding out that maybe that wasn't the way to be, I guess. Yeah.
Well, you see, now we have we didn't have termination. So pardon me for coughing.
Oh, yeah.
We now have, LGBTQI, it's changing all the time.
Yeah.
We have gay marriage, and we're so forward thinking, because it's the likes of my daughter who, certainly they are breaking the mold. They're not baptizing their children. They don't have that fear. They're putting their fingers up, and nobody's joining the priesthood or the nunhood.
Oh, right. There is a huge decline in that. I think that's a lot of the reason why they excuse a lot of the bad behavior of priests in the church, because they just don't have any priests coming to the seminary anymore. They're really dwindling big time. So you are a big part of the coalition of mother and baby home survivors. Is that based in Ireland then?
It is based in Ireland. We set up the coalition of mother and baby homes at the time of the commission. And we really had lobbied for, the commission, which cost millions and was totally a whitewash. And really, it was a waste of taxpayers' money. It was very traumatic for survivors going in. So with coalition, we pull in other kind of groups, so there's very much, like, when you say community, there's no kind of unity in our community in Ireland. And the Catholic Church has seen to that. And a lot of people are very brainwashed. There's a lot of in-house fighting.
Yeah. There's
a lot of mental health. There's a lot of trauma, deep trauma from the Catholic Church.
Oh, yeah.
So we set this up, and what we do is we represent, but we try to be all encompassing of, like, a lot of groups won't let you in if you're an adoptee. You've got to be a birth mother. Whereas we let birth mothers, adoptees, foster mothers, siblings of adoptees, we let everybody come in. Because everybody in Ireland, it's like rats, adoption. They're always within nearly 12 feet of you. Like, in Ireland, everyone you meet knows somebody adopted.
Absolutely. I've heard that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's incredible. It is a very, very small country. And even when I'm searching, it is quite easy to find people, even though names have been changed.
Right. Did you ever get the information on your birth mother? Did you ever meet your birth mother? Tell me a little bit about that?
I did. My adopted mother passed away when I was 23. So I suppose engulfed in grief, I was pregnant on my second child
Mm.
and I started searching. But this is the Catholic Church. I sent you my records.
Mm-hmm.
That my birth mother had been looking for me from the time of my adoption and
Oh,
had written frequently and
yeah.
sent toys. And I never received one letter, nothing. And the parish priest who was organizing it, they thought they were God, these men,
Mm-hmm.
kept on saying to my mother, can't give you a photograph, can't let the adopted family know. So you go through all your life, all the stages, 16, 18, 21, all these milestones, thinking that your mother abandoned you. And even with adoption, like everybody knows you're adopted before you know.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're
Mm-hmm.
told, like, that's not your real mother, and your mother was a dirty whore.
Oh.
So in my mind, I couldn't understand. I couldn't understand adoption. I couldn't understand how a child would be taken away, but that's
Mm-hmm.
what I was told. So the social
Lies.
worker wrote to me. Yeah, wait till you hear this. The social worker who worked for the Catholic Church, it was the Rescue Protection Society. I mean, who were they rescuing and protecting me from? But she had an affair with my father.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow. Oh my
So
gosh.
she was part of the social worker for the
Oh,
Catholic Church and
no, no morals.
placed me into a marriage, a very vulnerable child that she knew. And subsequently, that marriage broke up 3 years later.
Mm. That
So it's
that's a crazy
disgraceful,
twist.
really disgraceful.
Yeah.
And all of us have kind of little stories like that, or when we do our search. But yes, I did meet her and I met the social worker, and the social worker kept on saying, I remember your parents when they adopted you. And I felt like going, you bitch, you, yeah, but I didn't say
Yeah.
anything. So
Yeah.
I met my mother, my birth mother, and it was incredible,
Mm.
really incredible, because we met in the same room that we had been separated
Oh my
24
gosh.
years ago. And it was very bittersweet.
Oh.
Um, I was very young at the time. I'd just given birth to my second child,
Mm.
and I really wasn't mature enough to understand the how traumatic it was for both of us.
Mm-hmm.
We went for coffee, and I had a panic attack. I couldn't speak. I was overwhelmed
Yeah.
that this was my mother, that we were together again. And how did this happen? This
Right.
only happened in films. So
Mm-hmm.
I met her maybe 10 years later, which actually isn't uncommon in Ireland.
Okay.
Believe it or not, my birth mother is a devout Catholic
Still,
still.
just kind of like you mentioned Philomena, like the movie Philomena. She was a
Absolutely.
devote. They that generation, the ones who were the mothers, it seems like they were so brainwashed by the Catholic Church, the nuns, everyone there. They still, in their later years, felt like they did something wrong. They still felt like they were sinners.
Absolutely. Yes. And that is very common with the elders of the community,
Mm-hmm.
that I can never trace for their children because they don't want to be traced.
Okay.
They haven't told their husband. They've told their husband. Their husband thought that they were virgins getting
Mm-hmm.
married,
Yeah.
because in
Yeah.
Ireland you had to be a virgin getting
Mm-hmm.
married.
Yeah.
Otherwise you become an old maid.
Except that
So, and
no,
I wouldn't.
people really weren't virgins when they got married. I mean, were they really? I mean, they felt like they had to say that, I think, because of the retribution and the consequences with the church, and they would have been ostracized. But I feel like people have been having sex before marriage since the beginning of time. It's kind of just a human
Yes.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's even, when you look back at the history of Ireland, and when it comes to the Catholic Church, when the dance halls came in, I don't know what you call them in America, that, oh my God, the Catholic Church just, They thought it was Satan, and they tried to ban jazz music. And even in Ireland, up until I'd say maybe 80s, women who were married and had children had to be what was called churched. So they were not allowed outside their front door until they went to the parish priest and they went to the side altar and they were churched, because they were deemed to be dirty. A lot of women who were married said that they were suicidal. They weren't allowed outside their house. So
I
that's a
can
good
imagine.
one.
Yeah. Oh gosh. The treatment of women in Ireland was so barbaric in not even that long ago. I can't remember what year it was that I read, but not that long ago, women were just granted the ability to work outside the home in Ireland. That's not that new of a thing. And
that was in the 70s.
yeah.
Absolutely. And if you weren't married, you would go into the civil service and just become an old maid.
Mm-hmm.
But like, even in Ireland, when you're looking back, and it's not that long ago, we have a monthly payment called, everybody gets it, called the children's allowance.
Okay.
And that's really for the mothers to buy school shoes or whatever.
Okay.
And that actually was granted to the fathers. The mothers weren't allowed.
They didn't have control of the money. The men only had control of the money.
They couldn't have bank accounts in Ireland, women.
It just blows my mind.
It's incredible. And when my father left my mother, my adopted father left my adopted mother, literally we were like pariahs in the community. It was like there was something, and they're looking at my mother. It wasn't my mother, it was my father.
Right. Yeah, but they blamed the women for everything, absolutely, didn't they?
Yes.
Yeah. So were men in the home, the patriarch of the family, were they because I'm not from Ireland, what were the men like? What was the head of the household like? Were they abusive? Was there a lot of abuse in homes, or what were they like?
Very much so, yeah. And it didn't matter what class, whether it's working class, middle class, there was a lot of abuse towards women. There was an awful lot of marital rape, an awful lot of that happened.
Okay.
Again, because the women, it was so ingrained in them that you only had sex to have a baby.
Mm-hmm.
And like, I have done searches for people, and one woman had 13 children out of wedlock, and her 13 children were given up for adoption.
Oh my goodness. Wow. Yeah.
And she used to clean the Catholic church every morning. She'd get in her bike and go down and clean the altar and everything. And I won't say who the father was, because I think it's going into a film or something, but just incredible.
That is incredible.
But even in the home that I was in, the parish priest, there was a little shop there that your mothers would be able to go down and say, buy maybe a christening robe or whatever. But he would say to the mothers, if you have sex with me, he would buy the christening robe. And I kid you not.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Wow. These women are only after giving birth.
Okay, so people put priests on a pedestal and they really don't belong there. Here in America, the big thing with priests is the pedophilia. We've got a lot of pedophilia among priests, usually towards little boys most of the time. Do they have a lot of that in Ireland, or is it mostly just, just what's...
Oh, no, it's rampant. Absolutely rampant in Ireland. Wow. Particularly, there have been a few priests, I suppose, that have been, sent to jail. But I was part of something with the synod there recently, moving towards how do we move towards making the Catholic Church better? Mm-hmm. And the one thing we said is certainly that if there are people to become priests or bishops, they have got to meet survivors. They have got to go through courses and be vetted, because they're like in the arsehole of a dungeon in a big house with a housekeeper, not silver spoon, not totally realizing what is going on. And the Vatican also is a pool of it. What? Do you remember a child went missing there back in the 80s? Just disappeared.
Yeah.
Never found. And I've been to the Vatican. Oh, it's actually it's disgusting. It's so
Mhm.
opulent, the wealth.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
But the paedophilia in Ireland, certainly 60s, 70s, 80s, the priests were like sex maniacs. And I don't want to be upsetting anybody listening.
No,
It
I know
was
you're
disgusting
I've heard
and
the same thing actually in the research I've done about it. I've heard other people say the same thing.
disgusting.
Yeah, yeah,
And the parents, the same as Spotlight, the
I
film
watched that
Spotlight,
too.
super
Yeah.
film. But the same with, if the parish priest went into an Irish home and said, I'm just going up to read Paddy a bedtime story, the
Mm,
parents knew. They knew the abuse was going on most of the time. But Paddy wouldn't say anything, and the parents wouldn't say anything. Sure, who'd believe you?
right. Oh my goodness. So they were kind of complicit in it because again, they held the priests on such a pedestal and they would be kind of like honored when they would come to their home. That was a big deal.
Oh, yeah. And if you
Yeah.
had a bishop, you see, we were very much a farming, background, I suppose, in our kind of rural Ireland. I was reared in the city. So if you had one priest and one nun, oh my God, you were paved to heaven. That was it.
Oh,
It was
wow.
such a badge of honor to
Hmm.
have as that religion in your family. Like,
Hmm.
I don't know whether you have it in America, but up until, and it still happens in some homes, you go into the house and they have these, statues with flickering lights on their heart. Do you ever see those?
Oh, I think so. That sounds familiar. Not a lot of that, but I've seen them before. Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. Or you go in and they have holy water and they start like spraying you with holy
Oh,
water.
wow. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It's
I've
just,
seen
yeah.
that. Yeah. Well, I was raised Catholic actually, but just kind of like the kind of Catholics who would go to church on Christmas and Easter, that
Yeah.
kind of Catholic. So I'm a recovering Catholic at this point. So yeah, that's my thing. So what other anecdotes or stories do you have about, your time or are you in contact with other survivors? Do you have friendships or relationships with other survivors?
Yeah, I run a group in Ireland called Beyond Adoption Ireland, and I set that up 12 years ago. I was recovering from cancer,
Oh my
and a lot of
goodness.
us, because we were part of experiments in the homes,
Hmm.
um, that went on. Like as if it wasn't bad enough, they were allowing us to be experimented on,
In what
drug
way?
trials.
Like medications or
Oh, yeah,
yeah.
injections, medication, yes.
What?
And particularly a lot of women survivors, like I have severe problems with my bowel and digestion, and
Okay.
it's very prevalent. A lot of survivors have a bag, a colostomy bag. But I kind of went off on a different subject there because we could be talking
Wow.
for hours.
Well, I'm
um
good with that.
yeah.
I want to hear everything. I want to hear everything. So, and I don't even know totally what questions to ask because I know there's
No,
so
no,
much. So,
because it is so much, and I mean, what's the most beautiful thing in the world is the birth of a child,
oh,
but yet
yes.
they call it sin. And, you know, I didn't do anything wrong. So why? And our mothers didn't know we were being experimented on. Our
Okay.
mothers almost thought that we were special.
Okay. Okay.
And these experiments went on even when the children went out for adoption. A doctor would come. Dr. Coffey was the one in my home, but I was in hospital an awful lot for the first kind of 10 weeks, very, very unwell.
Mhm.
But as it transpires, they were doing drug trials. And
It's like it reminds me of a science fiction movie or
yeah,
or like The Handmaid's Tale is a series here or American Horror
I've seen it.
Story.
I actually, yeah, it's worse.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It just seems unreal.
Yeah. Um, I found that very triggering, Handmaid's Tale.
I'm
But
sure you did. Yeah.
with a lot, we do have, ill health, and again, not knowing our heritage, our lineage, our medical history,
Right.
we had to kind of find out the wrong way. So I suppose, yeah, I set up Beyond Adoption 12 years ago. Just really, I was a bit kind of green when it came to everything because I was adopted into a middle class family.
Okay.
So I was kind of shielded quite a
Right.
lot from the real history. Remember, it's not in the history books in Ireland, mother and baby homes. Magdalene
It's
Laundry is the only
hidden.
touch it.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's almost like they have that they don't want us to remember.
Right.
So there's now, I think it's 2,500 members on that. I
Wow.
have done searches, Canada, America, Australia, Ireland, thousands of searches, thousands of reunifications,
Oh my gosh.
getting people their original birth certs, finding families, doing DNA. And you do it when you start off, you do it like my background is working in mental health. It becomes like it's in my DNA now to do this.
Mm-hmm.
And it's such a privilege for people to allow me, and they come and ask me. And again, it's voluntary and I love doing it, to let them know who they are and where they came from.
That's
I mean,
so
isn't that the most
important.
basic human thing?
Yeah. Yeah,
Because
it
when
is.
you're adopted, you don't look like the people you're adopted to,
No.
and you're in a room and you're a stranger.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know that you don't belong to these people, but you're grateful because you're
Mm-hmm.
told to be
Right.
grateful.
Right. Yep. Yep.
So yes, I do. We have a farm, and as you can see, we have log cabins.
Yeah.
So many survivors come and stay with us.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
They would stay maybe, 2 or 3 nights. These survivors that would be very lonely, maybe short on money. A lot of survivors are sadly short on money because they went through such mental torture,
Right.
and education wasn't an option.
Mhm.
Addiction's very high as well, gambling. So they come
Suicide
down, and it's,
probably too. Like the
well,
suicide rate, I'm sure, is high among that group
it's
of people.
terribly, terribly sad because last Christmas, 12 months, I was doing a search with a girl who was from the west of Ireland. She was 34 and extremely articulate.
Hmm.
She had a little school, won't go into too much because it's so identifying here in
Oh, right.
Ireland.
I know. Everybody
And
knows everybody. Yeah.
she sent me an email that she had sent to TUSLA, which is our agency that's
Hmm.
supposed to help us search.
Okay.
And she said, you've destroyed my life. And I won't go into the rest, but she took her life Christmas Eve.
Oh, that is absolutely heartbreaking. So
We didn't know
tragic.
who she was,
Yeah.
and she wasn't Catholic.
And
Yeah.
that that has an effect not just on her family, but all the survivors as well. A deep impact. You all feel that. You all feel her pain. You know what
Very
she's going
common,
through. Hmm.
very, very common in Ireland, suicide ideation. Because remember, we have the mother and baby homes, we have the Magdalene laundries, we have the industrial schools, we
Hmm.
have the psychiatric hospitals, which a lot of women, when I have done searches for their children looking for them, their mothers were raped by
Priests and
priests.
workers at these institutions. I
Absolutely.
think, yeah. Uh, my understanding is that when a woman would try to run away because she didn't want to be in there for years and she didn't have the money to pay to get out. You could pay to get out, of course. It was the Catholic Church, you could pay to get out. But if they would run away multiple times, finally they would be locked up in a mental institution.
Oh yes,
Finally is
yes,
where they would
yes.
go. Yeah. It was prison, really. It was prison.
But it was, and a lot of women did try and escape, and even the police over here were in on it.
Mm-hmm,
The police
mm-hmm.
would go, like, they committed no sin, there was no crime,
No.
and the police would escort them back in, and
Yeah. They had a
just, and
baby. That's it. They had a
absolutely had
baby.
a baby by a man.
Oh.
And where are all the fathers? All our fathers, they all effed off. They got
Mm-hmm.
away scot-free.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And there's certainly with Tuam, there's only 2 or 3 nuns and they have Alzheimer's.
Mm-hmm.
They need to be, the only way in this country is, there needs to be redress.
Yes, I
And they
wanted to
have
talk about that. Redress, reparations, making it right. What are they doing right now?
an absolute mess what they've done, because with the inquiry, they said that anyone that was below 6 months as a baby in a home, it has no effect on us whatsoever. So therefore, we're not going to get any payment. Anyone that was over 6 months to a year gets €5,000.
I mean, that's not enough either, but
Five
that's
thousand, that would be
ridiculous.
bury them. Because a lot of survivors just want money to be able to bury themselves in a Catholic plot.
Right, right.
Okay.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. Yeah.
So 48% of us living survivors have been totally excluded from redress.
Wow.
So it's like as if all those experiments, that trauma, that separation, you can't equate, but survivors need money. They
Yes.
need money to be able to feed themselves. They're
Mhm.
in very poor health,
Mhm.
particularly the elders. And the mortality of the survivors, sadly, is 20% less than people that were within a loving family. It's the deep trauma that's in the DNA, the
It
body, the
is.
mind, the soul.
It early trauma leaves a scar.
Yeah.
It really does. And they started out in the world unhealthy, malnourished, separated from their mothers, just pinned down in a cot all day, you know. That leaves a
Yeah.
scar even if you were there
It,
10
it,
weeks.
it leaves, and I think we're very open now. The internet has been great for Irish survivors, and like we are talking about our early kind of trauma and childhood. And I certainly myself suffered from severe mental health,
Mm-hmm.
and I didn't know what was wrong with me. And eventually, it was PTSD. And I just always felt like I was running, the anxiety, because I didn't have, until I had my own children, I just wasn't, I didn't feel grounded. And a
Right.
lot of drinking and a lot of, things I shouldn't have been doing.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm here to live, to tell the tale, thankfully, whereas a lot of survivors aren't.
That's
And this
true.
happened, like people think pots of gold, and when you look at The Quiet Man and all these kind of films, the corruption in
Mm-hmm.
this country, and it's ongoing. But I'd say the only way is to cut the Catholic Church, and they know they're snookered. They know their time is up now. We're becoming very liberated in this country.
Right. That's a good thing. So, well, what are they doing? Are they offering money? Or now they are offering $5,000. But I heard something about food cards or something like that. Are they doing anything like that?
No, they're offering medical cards,
Medical cards.
which,
Okay.
yeah, but most survivors have medical cards, because we're on, I don't know, what you call it, social security in your
Mm-hmm.
country. It's
Mm-hmm.
social welfare in this country. So they get it anyway. And our medical system is okay in Ireland. It's not the worst.
Mm-hmm.
It's not great for mental health. No, they're not offering, and surely there should be sheltered housing for some survivors.
Mm-hmm.
No, 5,000 and basically go away and just leave us alone. The Catholic Church were so clever that they had the prime locations. I mean, their houses that they sold were millions.
Mm-hmm.
They sold up. They knew all this was coming down the line.
Mm-hmm.
They
Mm-hmm.
sold up and they shipped out.
Mm-hmm. They did. I read that. Like the Sisters of Bon Secours, they closed down and moved away, and it was interesting
Yeah,
because typically I know Irish people are very death and burial and funerals, things like that are
yeah,
sacred, and they they did not treat the babies in that kind of way. They disposed of them like trash. Yet the
yeah,
women, the nuns who passed away during the time that the institution was open, got a full, respectful, proper burial. And when they moved to a different location, they exhumed all of those 14
yeah,
nuns, took them and reburied them properly. But the babies that died there were shoved into a sewer pit. So uh,
yeah.
that's the topic of the new documentary that just recently came out in the United States. It's called The Missing Children. Have you watched that at all or anything?
No,
It's by
no, not
a
yet.
media company or streaming network called Topic is the name of it.
Right.
So I don't know if it's an American thing or what, but they go into detail, and that's really what brought this story to light for me, is that new documentary. Before that, I did not know that any of this happened. I didn't know anything about any of this, and just hearing the details, it seemed just Like it could not possibly be true. Like, how could this happen in an industrialized nation? How could this happen in a modern society? But it did.
Yeah, it absolutely did, and as you say, Handmaid's Tale, everybody in Ireland knew what was going on. It was the best kept secret. The politicians and the priests even had their own private mother and baby home, a step up from us little scumbags.
Wow.
It was just, and that was like in a huge Georgian house, and the women were treated better. They got medication. And where do you leave the illegal adoptions as well?
Oh my gosh, that's another entire topic. Illegal adoptions. Basically they would buy babies, without the consent of the mother. A lot of the times mothers were told that their baby had died, and that was a lie. And they would forge death certificates. They would forge adoption certificates. They'd forge all the paperwork.
Yeah, I'm doing a search at the moment for twins, because twins, Caucasian, Catholic, Irish. Yeah. So these twins were born in the late 50s. Their mother was in a psychiatric institution. She had many children that were taken off her. But they told her that her twins had died. And when we looked at the records, it actually said destined for America. They forged the death cert. So this is a search that's ongoing. You might want to come back, Kelly, at some time, and we can talk again.
Yeah.
But we're fighting at the moment. They're saying that these twins are born in the grounds of Bessborough. No, we think that these twins were sold to America. As they say 3,000, we reckon it's more 6,000.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of, fighters were coming in through Shannon, Americans basically just popping down to a mother and baby home, putting a baby under their arm and bringing a baby home to their wife.
Yeah.
And that's what went on. And the American embassy allowed it in Ireland, and the Irish embassy. It was just...
They just closed their eyes, buried their heads in the sand, and pretended like it wasn't happening because...
Well, the Holy Trinity, really, as long as everybody's getting paid. But we are now the casualties of this.
Yes.
We are the living modern history survivors.
Yes.
And what it has done, with the intergenerational trauma that our children suffer.
Right. Yes.
Our trauma.
It's a cycle.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it is a cycle. And it's very hard to break because you don't know how to break it, because it's foreign matter. It's something that was done to you and you did nothing. Did nothing to deserve it.
Yep. The innocent victims of the Catholic corruption in Ireland and greed, and cover up and conspiracy too. Thank you so much for talking to me today. Is there anything you want to add, or any, websites you want to plug, or the coalition?
The coalition, but Beyond Adoption Ireland is a very, very good site because like what we're seeing now in Ireland is there's a lot of children coming in from China and Korea. And so if anybody kind of just wants to kind of connect and just see what kind of Irish adoptees or Romanians that were big, Ceausescu, in the 90s and all of that. So it's just kind of, if people want to come in, it's a really warm, encompassing group. It's lovely.
That's great.
So
Beyond Adoption.
Beyond Adoption Ireland.
Okay.
Come back anytime.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much for sharing your story. I'm very excited for my listeners to hear this, and I want to get information out there on all of this that happened. Yeah. So, and I love Ireland too. I've never been, but I hope to come this year. So
you should.
I will.
It's a beautiful country.
Yeah. Thank you, Clodagh, so much.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Yep. Thank you. Have a great week.
Keep in touch.
I will. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.
True Crime IRL is written, produced, and hosted by Kelly Behrens-Brink. Please subscribe to True Crime IRL wherever you get your podcasts, and consider leaving a 5-star review. Go to TrueCrimeIRL.com for more information. Support the show by becoming a Patreon donor. Go to patreon.com/TrueCrimeIRL podcast. You can also support the show by leaving a tip in the TCIRL tip jar. Go to TrueCrimeIRL.com and click on the donate button, or buy merch in the TCIRL merch shop. TrueCrimeIRL.com/merch. Watch True Crime IRL on YouTube at youtube.com/KellyBrinkTV. Be sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at True Crime IRL, all one word. True Crime IRL theme music is produced by the Captain at True Crime Garage.